Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales, proudly presented by Membrane. This podcast is your gateway to mastering the craft of modern selling. If you're passionate about growth, impact, and unlocking full potential in sales and revenue, you're in the right place. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And now let's get started with today's guest. Hey, everybody. Here's a question for you. How do we connect working with founder-led sales teams to building strong families and raising brave kids? Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today with my guest and good friend, James Rores. James is a creator of the WINS method. He's been a part of 6 exits, 3 IPOs, and he has a passion for helping founder-led sales teams transition to scalable revenue engines. He's helped more than 7,500 sales leaders and founders and tens of thousands of the reps on their teams. And he does this to build sales systems that actually work. But what is making him different is that he doesn't just teach sales, he teaches impact. His value chain is simple and powerful. Strong businesses create strong communities build strong families, and strong families create brave kids. So today we're exploring how founder-led teams can move from hustle and heroics to repeatable systems, and how that shift can create ripple effects far beyond revenue. So let's get into it with James Rores. James Rores, welcome to the show, my friend.
How are you? Great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. Good to have you back. I think this is number 3.
Yeah, something like that.
It would be 150 if we could make it happen once a week, but
well, it's a pleasure to be here, man. Any chance I get to hang out with you, and I always learn something, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, shucks. That's why I do this, so I can learn something from you. But you got some cool stuff going on, so I want to dive kind of right into that. And one of the coolest things I love interviewing and talking to people about is their passions. And you have you got a passion for sales, and you're honing down too on a specific mission in there. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've been doing this for about 30 years. The business itself about 20. Actually, this is our 20th year in business, 2026.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. I got to do something to celebrate, I think.
You got to do something for your wife to celebrate.
For putting up with all this.
Yes,
yeah, no doubt.
Yes.
No doubt. Yeah, so we've been doing it for a while, and when you take a look back and think about what you've accomplished, and you're doing that in the context of what's next, we kind of settled pretty quickly on working more closely with founder-led sales teams. I'm a 4th generation entrepreneur, so I know what it's like to come through a family business, all those dynamics. So there's a great connection there. But when you're working with founders who are figuring things out for the first time, trying something new, oftentimes the business for them is fulfilling a passion that came about when they experienced the problem that they're solving as an employee for an organization. And so, love working with those folks, love helping them fill the gaps that are going to make their dreams become real. And, our mission since we started has always revolved around creating jobs. And so I just love the idea of supporting organizations that really have the promise of creating some outstanding jobs and supporting communities, supporting families, all that stuff.
Yeah. What was, you had a formula there that I really loved. It was something around, well, you can say it better than I can probably repeat it, but
our
sales
value chain.
Revenue to, well, what is it? Tell me more about that.
Well, as part of we built a value chain that kind of represents our mission. And it's this idea that strong businesses create strong communities create strong families create brave kids. And so our mission is we connect strong companies to brave kids. And it's this idea of so whenever we can, we invest heavily in supporting kids. That we want them to face their future without fear. That's what we mean when we talk about brave kids. And so we think companies can have a lot. Well-run companies that are properly led can have a lot to do with building those communities and families that produce our future, right? That a sustainable future, kids that are entrepreneurial, creative, thoughtful, and working within scalable, healthy values. Not something I learned young in my youth, but something I've been learning ever since.
Yeah, well, and I love how you connect your passion to a value chain, to a mission, and that's something that I've really always loved and respected about you, and you live.
Thanks.
This particular founder-led sales seems to have a massive potential for creating that impact. I mean, so why specifically do you have a passion around that? I know, you're an entrepreneur, you love that, but why does it touch you that you really want to focus on this crew?
Yeah, you'd have to ask my coach for the real reason why, I think. But when I think about my story, when I left grad school in '91, I often tell folks that I left with three strikes against me: the arrogance of my youth, the arrogance of my MBA, and the arrogance of having been raised an entrepreneur. And I was maybe the most extreme version of all three of those arrogances. So I thought I could do it all on my own. And over the next 15 years, I attempted to do that. I worked within 8 startups or near startups, had 6 exits and 3 IPOs, public events, and burnt out, right? Last day of the year in 2024, and physically burnt out. And it was really just because, I had fashioned myself as a founder's best friend, right? The guy who could come in and figure out how to sell something that, it was something that solved the problem our customers didn't know they had, right? And it was something, and we were selling for a company that they had never heard of, right? So we didn't have any of the benefits that more stable organizations with bigger brands have. So I was the guy that could figure that out. And what ended up happening as I look back on that is that I was kind of adopting the same level of pressure and intensity that many founders would bring to their role. And we kind of shared this idea of success at all costs. Everything in our lives became secondary to what we were doing. And that when you have that mentality, you gain the belief that you can trial and error your way to success. You can figure it out. You also, it's a very empowering way to be, right? It's the antithesis of this feeling like you're the victim, right? Well, this is like leadership at its highest level. But the problem is it creates a lot of pressure and stress. It diminishes relationships, doesn't value relationships, doesn't value or build team. And what you end up doing is building an organization of individual contributors that aren't leveraging themselves. And when you can't take advantage of that leverage, then you're losing a lot of what's required to actually create the scale that gets you from that founder-led organization to something bigger and more sustainable. Yeah.
Well, so I've seen we both walked this planet a fair number of years now, but I see that seems to be the crux of one of the things that happens when organizations simply can't scale. Like they just simply, they hit a wall because the founder and maybe the one other person in there has hit a wall, and they can't move past that type of leadership. Like, what are the shifts that you need to start to make, and how are you helping organizations kind of start to make those shifts from that founder-led to an actual, and to a thriving sales organization?
Right. It's I used to think it was pretty complex, but it's pretty straightforward. There's two core elements here. The first core element is this idea of you're recognizing what you're building, right? And you're actually, as a founder or as a top producer who's enabling the bad behavior or the undesired behavior of the founder, you're demonstrating that being the hero, showing up as the hero, leveraging your intuition, your charm, your force of will to make things happen, even in the midst of crippling pressure to get things done, taking on that mantle of maybe dysfunctional leadership and making it work every time. If you can get addicted to that kind of behavior, and you can feel like that's the only way that you can succeed. So the first thing that we're doing is we're helping them understand that you've got to turn that focus on being the hero into a system, right? So you and I have talked a lot about this idea of the science and the art. We talk about the art of the individual and the science of the system. What we want to do is we want to bring founders that perspective. Let's think about how we can identify the patterns of success in your behaviors that we can teach to other people. And let's begin to build that system that makes everything that you're doing transferable. The other part of this is, a lot of organizations that I work with that aren't founder-led have the same challenge. They might have a baseline level of training within the organization for onboarding purposes and so forth. But that training only gets the team so far. The training doesn't turn that new hire into a top performer. They still believe in that organization that I can only get new hires so far, and the rest of it, they have to figure out themselves. So now everybody comes into the organization with some baseline insights, but then to be that top performer, you've got to accept the pressure and find that ability to be the hero. And when you tell someone to figure it out for themselves, you may be able to do that, but you're setting them up for a very inefficient path to success. So whether you're a founder-led organization or an organization that just needs to get over that hump, in both organizations, there's that last mile of training and development that is missing in most organizations that can actually turn a high-performing team into a team of top producers. And that's really what founders are looking for. Help me create the system so I can create the scale and achieve that next level of growth. And really, any organization that adapts and adopts existing training is going to run into this problem, because most, maybe 90% or more, can't build a top performer. They have no idea what that secret sauce is. They can't hire them consistently, and they can't develop them consistently. That's a problem.
Yeah, I forget who I learned this from, but somebody was telling me about the philosophy of kind of of coaching and leading by percentages. Like, most organizations are decent, at least passable, at getting somebody to that, from 0 to 70% of the things they need to learn and lead. That gets them a bunch of C players generally, right? And they may have one or two that find the way to the elite status, but most of them settle at that, like that 0 to 70% or maybe 80% of the information. But that 70 to 95% is a part that people don't invest in. They generally expect the reps to do that on their own. And then even more, that 95 to 100% is the area that, gets completely ignored, right? It's this idea of, go out and just use your personal development budget and get yourself to the next tier. But what I'm hearing from you is that most people that they settle on that, 0 to 70, 80%, and founders can do that through, base training programs and that, but being able to truly replicate and get to that level of mastery is a challenge, like at every organization, and really big challenge in founder-led organizations. Did I play that back to you right?
You did. And so the real key here, my man, is thinking about what is it that makes that founder or that top producer special, right? What is it that allows them to operate at a level, even without any sales training, formal sales training? How do they take this product or service that they've created without any formal sales training in most cases and go build a company, close those $1 million accounts? How do they do it? And over the years, we've trained folks to do this, and we've seen this replicated over and over again. What's really interesting about a founder is that they are intimately aware of the problem that they're solving. Now, they, of course, are aware of the service or product that they've built to address the problem, but their first love is the problem that they have to solve. And so when they meet folks, they're oftentimes not showing up like a traditional transactional salesperson who follows that process of pitch, propose, and defend. They kind of fall into this malaise where they are so attached to the solution. Why? Because that's what their onboarding was all about, right? When they're hired, they're taught the solution. And so a buyer, right, seduces them into that transactional trap by saying, so tell me about you, tell me about your product, why should I buy you? How do you differentiate yourself from your competition? So even after the rep asks all those great questions, they fall into this trap of pitching. And the buyer has no idea if the pitch is good or not until they compare you to your competition. So they stall the process, go out and compare you to the competition. They come back and say, great, give me a proposal. They have no idea if your price is suitable. So they stall the buying cycle, go out and compare you to the competition, come back, and then they come back to you with the great news. You're one of 3. Now you have to defend yourself. So you've gone through the pitch, propose, defend process, and most salespeople replicate that because they come into the organization with the mindset of a salesperson. And when you look at the founder, what the founder went to market with was the mindset of a problem solver, right? So they went to market understanding the problem. So they connect with the buyers at the problem level. And in most cases, they're helping the buyer understand what they saw, what they realized about the problem that the buyer doesn't understand. They introduce new ideas, new concepts. They actually educate the buyer on the scope of the real problem that they're facing. This earns them not only understanding and a level of trust, but a level of respect, right? So a lot of founders will hire a sales team and ask themselves, how come they can't be as successful as me? And it's because those salespeople aren't going to market with the mindset of a leader or a problem solver.
Yeah, the other thing that that goes along with that in terms of the problem solver, I'm interested in your opinion, but is the the ability to drive change, right? Mm-hmm. So, and founders naturally have that. They've had to go through the depths of their own, right, their own self to figure out how to drive this business forward, as well as drive change in the first couple of pilot organizations and those type of stuff. So they're intimately involved with that.
Right.
Right. How do you help with that mindset? How do you help moving from a salesperson? I mean, that's the 0 to 70, 80% training, right, that you get. And then how do you help move to that problem solver, leader, change agent? You would call this a growth multiplier at one point. What are the cores there?
Right. Yeah. So what we've learned is, the first thing we've learned is we don't call our stuff sales training, right? And we have moved entirely away from a training platform fully to adopting a workbook. platform, and that workbook turns into a playbook. So whenever I meet anyone who's looking for training, I will ask them about the successes that training has delivered to them, and I usually get that. In your case, that 70% solution, right? So what are we not doing? Well, what you're not doing is collecting all of the success patterns that are required to actually move from being a salesperson to practicing sales as a leadership competency, right? And so the first thing, to your point, we believe that people buy when they're ready, willing, and able to change. And so what we have to think of ourselves as is change agents, right? We are leaders of change. We are driving change. The only way to drive change is to help the person you're talking to understand the problem as well as you do. So how do you build that confidence in leadership? You have to make sure that the work you're doing with the salespeople is more focused on the problem the buyer faces than the solution they're delivering, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care about the solution. I don't care how it works, because none of it means anything if I don't understand it in the context of the issues my buyer are facing. So if a buyer recognizes that you've been there, done that you know them as well as or better than they know themselves, which many founders do because they've been through that process, as you said, of change, then that buyer begins to believe and have confidence in you. And the more they understand the problem, the more momentum is built, right? Salespeople, including myself, we carry so much of the pressure of driving buying momentum, or in our case, bringing selling energy to the table, that we push so hard, we bring so much stress and pressure that it burns us out early, when all we really have to do is develop the buyer's understanding of their problem. And that understanding is the thing that brings the energy and brings momentum to the table. So it's not like you move from chasing to actually leading, right? Instead of chasing a buyer, the more I can help them understand their problem, the more they ask me, so what's next? What's next? What do we do next? They're asking me for advice. They're looking for my recommendation about what next is. And everyone who's listening to this that's sold before has experienced this, right? We've all had those great buyers who have really been thoughtful listeners. And the question is, well, how do you recreate that every time? That's what we teach folks.
You did a post the other day on LinkedIn I saw, and maybe we'll repost it or find it when we do the episode. But it was really around that, starting this type of thing in the first, and training reps to start this thing in the first 30 minutes of like, how do we shift the mindset of that first call even to this problem solver instead of answer, Q&A answer provider, right?
Right.
So talk a little bit about that, because that is like where the rubber starts to hit the road in an actual call that a rep could use.
Yeah. I think a lot of reps go to market thinking, I am my solution. My solution's in a box, and I'm just going out to the world to share my solution. And if we understand anything about buying, that's not how people buy, right? If you think about yourself and how you make a buying decision, the first thing you have to do is decide that there's a reason to change. So there has to be a desire or a frustration that's making you think, now's the time to change. Mm-hmm. Then you have to be thinking to yourself, so once I understand why I changed, now I have to ask myself, well, why now? Why can't I just ignore this? Well, the impact of success or failure has to be too great to ignore, right? So I have to have a desire or frustration that's triggering the change. The impact of success or failure has to be too great to ignore. And then I have to understand what's missing, right? If I don't understand what I want, if I don't understand the impact of success or failure, and I haven't identified the need, what's missing, I can't make a buying decision. In other words, I can't define the problem in front of me that I have to solve. And if I can't define the problem, I can't buy any solution. So if I'm going to market just pitching solutions, I'm depending upon the buyer to already know their wants, impacts, and needs. What's the desire or frustration that triggered my buying cycle? What's the impact that I expect from this decision, and what's missing? If you're just pitching, you're expecting the buyer to already know those three things.
But James, they just asked me for a demo.
Well, look at the easy answer, my friend, is look, when someone says, hey, how can you help me? The answer is, I don't know, right? Or a better answer would be, I'd be happy to make a strong recommend. I'd be happy to share my solution once I can make a strong recommendation. Would you mind if I ask you a few more questions? So the idea here is you have to greet this buyer who wants to seduce you into that transactional trap by saying, tell me about yourself, tell me about your solution. They're trying to get to a decision without giving you the chance to actually do your job, right? They want to make this as short and as sweet as possible. And what they're doing is they're missing the potential value that you can bring to the conversation. So you have to resist the temptation to just speed up and share your solution, and think about yourself from the perspective of a servant leader, someone who's there to serve, right? To serve the problem that this person has and lead them along a path to change. So how can I serve you best? I can serve you best by asking you questions that help me understand what you think your problem is. That way I can tell you whether or not I'm going to be a good fit, whether I can recommend you to someone else. And if you are a good fit, I'll know enough about your challenge that I can then tailor my recommendation to fit you perfectly and make sure you get the return you expect.
And I've never made this connection before, but all the way back to the founder and the founder-led sales.
Right.
That is one of the things they have to do naturally. Like they just have to dive in. I mean, some do it better than others, obviously, but they have to dive into the state of that company and the wants and the impacts and the needs before they could ever really describe the solution that could ever potentially help, because a lot of times they're making it up on the fly. I mean, it's like, so that replication, I've never put the two together, that leadership and that absolute necessity at the founder level is critical to scaling that to the sales reps, or they just there's just a lot of frustration. There's a lot of frustration on a part of the founder that says, well, I've developed something great, and why can't they just sell it? And how often do you run into founders that have no idea, especially founders of companies that, have potential for growth and are growing and have gathered enough customers to be relevant, that they have no idea their own gifts in that area. Like they just are clueless.
It's a great question. I think most founders find success, and it's really hard for them to get past the first layer of understanding why, right? If you social media is abuzz with advice on how to be successful, and this idea of being persistent, working hard, taking responsibility, being creative, having good values, all those things, those are all surface level dynamics. I can't tell you the number of founders I've met. They don't even, not only do they not understand what makes them successful as salespeople, they have no idea what their gross margin is. They have no idea what their operating margins are. They have no idea what their EBITDA is. They have no idea what a budget is. And this is not designed to be critical. All I'm saying is all of those things, those are all things that are important to scaling a business. We don't tend to think of those things as being critical to founding a business. Even getting to $3, $4, $5, $6, $8, $10 million in revenue, many founders can get that big before they even go to the next layer of understanding just what are the reasons why, and what are those levers that I can turn to optimize my operation. oftentimes it requires, some outside help, folks that have been there and done that to help them think through a lot of that stuff. But it's totally reasonable and totally understandable that that they get to a point where they've actually established a business that's actually making money and not really be thoughtful about why it's happening.
Well, let's talk. I have one last question on that, which is, so many founders also that I see make a mistake of thinking that they can scale their success and their sales team simply by hiring good people, like the next 3 good people. And so, or people that have had past success in sales. So they're like, oh man, this guy killed it over here. He's going to be great. And are completely dumbfounded when that doesn't happen. Why is that?
Lots of reasons. So the great example. So, there are folks that believe they can just hire someone who's recommended. So friends and family, right? Easy to go to. This guy's killed it everywhere he's been. And for some reason, when I hire him, it doesn't work. So what's really interesting here is there's 2 big reasons. One is the founder doesn't know why they were successful. And there's this big gap. And it's easier, and people tell them that they can, that this is the truth, but it's easier to just believe, right, that a salesperson is a salesperson is a salesperson is a salesperson. It's easier just to believe that I can short circuit this, not figure out why I've been successful, and just hire someone and roll the dice. And I think most salespeople, if you hired a salesperson and asked them exactly why they were successful in the business that they just left or were thinking about leaving, they couldn't tell you why. Mm-hmm. Right? I love it when I see a LinkedIn profile of somebody who is a one-time chief revenue officer, and he claims that he or she grew the business from $1 million to $100 million in 5 years, right? And you look at that person, and they certainly brought some value to the table, but we all know that was the result of many, many, many people, a lot of luck, a lot of good fortune, a lot of systems, a lot of other things that had nothing to do with the skill set that person brought to the table, right? We know that growth sales, it's a team sport. The real question is, can you replicate that team, right? So what hiring represents to me is that it's that cheat, that easy thing that we can throw money at that we hope works. I think there's also this idea, Paul, that there's this FOMO, fear of missing out, not from a greed perspective, but from an envy perspective, right? We begin to hear stories of other folks that have done it. I compare my business to other businesses that have salespeople that are killing it, and I become envious of them, and I begin to make these investments thinking that it should happen to me. And what we're missing is that that hard work to figure out exactly why we were successful. And yes, that is something, my man, that you cannot do effectively through trial and error. You've got to go hire effective people. You got to go hire people that can answer the right question. Not, can you sell this, but can you help me figure out why I was successful, and then help me replicate that. Imagine making your first sales hire meet those objectives. Imagine the conversation you'd have. Imagine how you'd cut through the bullshit.
Yeah, it's a massively different expectation and person that you're looking to bring forward. So I could talk to you about this for hours. We're gonna need to shut down now. But James, how do people find you if they want to continue the discussion with you?
Yeah, James Rores, RORES.com. And I'm also, I think, the only James Rores on LinkedIn. Hit me up. Lots of content and lots of opportunity to get to know each other.
All right. And I, as someone who's known James for years, I would highly recommend the conversation. And please do reach out if you're founder led or that top sales rep that's looking to go to the next level. Any final thoughts to close us up, James?
Yeah. It's been a great conversation. I'd say for anyone who wants to drive success, the big question to ask is the why. What is the why behind how I got to where I am, and how do I make it replicatable? For any founder, the key to scalability and sustainability is being able to replicate that success in other folks. That's the key, and that's where we're focused.
All right. Hey, everybody. Make sure you're reaching out to James. Make sure as well you're doing all of the social media things. You're liking, you're sharing, you're subscribing, all that jazz. And thank you so much for coming on the show, James. And thank you so much for listening, everybody. Keep shining bright, keep elevating the sales profession, and have an absolutely amazing day. We'll talk soon.